The main purpose of the power clean is, again, dynamic hip extension. One of the most common things you'll find in any sport is a hip flexion to extension. You can see it in running, you can see it in jumping, pretty much anything in sport. So generating a really good dynamic extension of the hip is really important. The power clean is one of the best exercises to be able to do that with. Starting off with the power clean, I actually would recommend starting from the hang position. The hang position is actually grabbing the bar and standing vertical with it. The reason I like to do this is so that you can sort of understand that hip flexion to dynamic hip extension. All right, first movement is what we call a dip shrug. The idea is generating a flexion through your hip, keeping your chest upright, keeping a good neutral spine, and then violently standing or exploding your hip into a shrug position, right in there. All right, again, the main idea is letting your hips lead the movement into a shrug position, right in there. All right. Once you understand the explosion of the hip, that violent hip extension, then the rest of the movement should come pretty naturally. And the idea is to let that explosion of the hip lead the bar to your shoulders. So the next coaching point here is, after you get your hip extended, shrug shoulders, is to get a little pull through your elbows. Elbows high, pulling the ball up towards your chest. Hip extension, shrug, pull. All right, the main thing here is, one, keeping that spine straight, and two, keeping the bar as close to your body as possible. You want to avoid letting the bar swing out. It's much more challenging to hold a heavy bar out in front of you than close to your body. All right, from that position, explode your hips, shrug your shoulders, pull your arms up, and you're basically catching the bar on your shoulders. Notice where my elbows stand right here, out in front of the bar. The main thing is, you can see where my hands are as well, is letting the bar rest on the shoulders, rather than pulling the bar up and just holding it nice and tight. That overloads the shoulders a little much. You want to load the spine with the bar. Some of the most common mistakes with the power clean, one is letting the bar get too far away from your body. That leads to a few different things. One, it leads to lack of control of the bar, and two, a lot of times it leads to a horrible catch, which can lead to a lot of pressure in your lower back, where the bar comes back on you like so. Obviously you want to avoid that. Just me demonstrating it was hard enough. That's one. Two is you want to avoid gripping the bar way too tight on your catch. The idea is you don't want to overload those shoulders and let the bar pull you forward. All right. Number three is a stiff catch on your hips. The idea is to functionally translate this movement into sport, and you never are standing really stiff through your hips. So when you catch the bar, you don't want to have this really stiff catch. You want to think of pulling yourself underneath the bar, good, and reestablishing that flexion of the hip, then standing into the final point there. All right, so a couple of the most important things are always keeping your spine straight. You don't want to be rounded through here, letting the bar control your spine. You're in control if you have a nice tight spine. That's one. Two, avoiding the bar coming away from your body, or reverse curling the bar up to your shoulders. Keep it nice and close. Three, nice and loose on your fingers, so that you're not gripping it too tight and overloading your shoulders. And four, catching it soft in your hips. It's such a technical lift that I like to use it in probably between the 3 and 5 repetition range, keeping it in like the 3 to 8 sets. I tend to avoid really high rep ranges with this, because the second you get really high rep, your form will start to fall apart. So with a really technical move like this, keep it low, really focusing on perfect mechanics. For the power clean, obviously the most common, if you were to Google power clean, the most common thing you'll see is guys with a barbell lifting the weight up to their shoulders, just because it's an Olympic lift. But again, like with so many of the movements that I like to teach, you can use any tool for this. The idea with the power clean is ground to overhead, ground to shoulder, or hang to shoulder. So you can use any tool for this. A sandbag coming up to the shoulder, a kettlebell coming up to the shoulder, a dumbbell coming up to the shoulder, a log coming up to your shoulder, a friend coming up to your shoulder. The same concept is you're using a dynamic hip extension to hoist a weight up onto the shoulder range. So really the bar is a great tool, obviously, to learn the technical aspects of it, but you can translate that into any tool whatsoever.